What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Sunday, February 16th, 2025, and I have an emergency alert to share with you guys. Right now it is 17:27 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So late last night, there was a 268 character emergency action message, which is extremely rare. So an emergency action message is a type of nuclear code, and it's basically just targeting instructions to our submarines, our missile silos, and our bombers. Normally they're about 30 characters, and last night a 268 character message was transmitted on the primary U.S. nuclear war frequency. And the last time that happened was April of last year, when Iran and Israel were exchanging missile strikes, okay? So something is going on. And also, there were a bunch of aerial refuelers in the South China Sea. U.S. KC-135s flew into the South China Sea, 3 of them. And also there was a Chinese recon plane in the Taiwan Strait. There was also a high-priority U.S. reconnaissance plane sent to the Middle East last night through Indonesia. And also at the same time as the 268-character emergency action message, there was an unscheduled Polish intelligence broadcast. And if you don't know what they are, they're known as the E11 broadcasts, or the oblique messages. And these are basically Polish intelligence messages, so they're sent out to Polish intelligence operatives, and they're actually part Russian, part Polish. So typically these are for Polish agents in Russia or Russian-speaking countries, because the messages are in Russian and Polish. There were also several Russian Doomsday planes scrambled at the same time as this 268-character message was broadcasted last night. Here you can see several of them. Okay, 214PU, a 214SR, a 204-300. These are all Russian Doomsday planes, and they were scrambled up into the air for some reason. So we have some major breaking news coming in from Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence is saying that Russia is forming 10 to 15 divisions of 100,000 troops that are going to be sent to Belarus this summer under the guise of exercises. Now, remember the last time Russia moved 100,000 troops saying it was an exercise was right before they invaded Ukraine. Well, now they're doing the same thing, except they're doing it in Belarus, which means they're preparing to invade the Baltics and possibly Poland. Now, last year, there was some leaked footage of the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, speaking with one of his generals right at the border of Lithuania, stating that they would have to take a piece of northern Poland and Lithuania. Okay, so they've already been practicing for this. Belarus has already moved their troops to the border of Lithuania. Russia already has like 30,000 troops in Belarus on the border of Poland. Belarus already has hundreds of S-400 missiles on the border of Poland in Grodno and Brest, literally just 2 miles from the Polish border. They also have hundreds of S-400 missiles in Kaliningrad, right on the border of Poland. So Russia is well prepared for this. Belarus now has nuclear weapons as well. They have tactical nuclear weapons in the form of Iskander missiles with nuclear warheads on them, and air-launched nuclear weapons of some kind, okay? So this is a very serious situation, and the president of Ukraine confirmed this in an interview with NBC. So let me just read some information about this. Intelligence reports indicate that there is a high risk that Russia is preparing troops for a possible invasion of NATO member states, President Zelensky told NBC News in an interview published February 16th. Zelensky spoke to NBC on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Russia is training 150,000 troops in Belarus for a large-scale operation that could happen as early as this summer, Zelensky said. The preparations could signal a plan to invade a NATO country. There are risks that this can be Poland and Lithuania because we believe that Putin will wage a war against NATO, he said. Ukraine has intelligence and documents regarding Russia's troop buildup in Belarus, but does not exactly know what Putin is planning to do, according to Zelensky. The president shared that Ukraine had shared these intelligence reports with allies. Russia is waiting for a weakening of NATO, Zelensky warned. He also said he believes Putin only wants a ceasefire in order to prepare a greater number of troops for more ambitious future military actions. He is thinking not only about Ukraine, Zelensky said. There is a high risk that Russia will set its sights on other countries, particularly those near Ukraine that are now NATO member states, he said. Okay, so they have intelligence, they have documents, and they shared it with NATO. This is very, very serious, guys. Okay, and a lot of people in the comments in one of my previous videos were saying that you shouldn't believe anything Ukraine says, that their intelligence is full of shit. Ukraine actually accurately predicted the invasion like 3 or 4 months before Russia invaded, and I remember doing a video about this right before they invaded. It was like late winter 2021. I posted a video and I reported that Ukrainian intelligence has released a map showing potential invasion routes that Russia's about to take to invade them. And this was like December of 2021. They invaded in February of 2022. Okay, and I remember the same thing, the same crowd of people saying, oh, that's fake news, that's full of shit, Ukraine, you can't trust them. Well, sure enough, they were right, okay, and I'm going to try to dig back into my files to find that original picture that Ukrainian intelligence shared showing arrows of where Russian forces were about to invade from, and that was like 3 months prior. Okay, so Ukrainian intelligence actually knows a lot of what they're talking about because they're half Russian speaking in Ukraine. So they have a lot of operatives in Russia. They blend well with the Russian society. They have so many operatives in Russia in high levels of the Russian government, okay? And on Sunday, the EU Foreign Affairs Chief Kaja Kallas called for an emergency meeting in Munich. So they had an emergency meeting today in the EU with regards to Ukraine and European security. I'm sure it's related to this intelligence that Zelensky shared. And Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, called an emergency summit in Paris on Monday. The Prime Minister of Denmark has already said that he's going to be attending, and the British Prime Minister is going to be attending as well. So all the big countries in Europe are going to be meeting tomorrow in Paris, and they also met today. Okay, emergency meetings now being held about Ukraine, about European security in light of this intelligence and in light of the new administration here in the U.S. And now we're hearing that Europe is preparing a new large joint military aid package for Ukraine. It's likely to be presented at the end of the month. And Russian and U.S. delegations will be meeting in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia this coming week. And the goal will be to arrange a meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin. That's going to be their goal. Okay, U.S. National Security Advisor Walls and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Special Representative Steve Witkoff will be going to Riyadh this week. Okay, they're going to be flying out tonight. Okay, they're going to stay there for several days. They're going to meet with the Russians. And Marco Rubio said today that the coming days will determine if Russia is willing to come to the table with a realistic, lasting peace deal. Okay? And so this is a very serious situation, guys. And, you got to think about what Putin's ambitions are, okay? Putin's not going to sign a peace deal that's going to force him to give anything up, okay? I don't see that happening. He's never done that, and that would make him look weak if he basically gave in to Western demands, okay, when he's the hardliner that started this war, and then suddenly he's going to give in and sign a peace deal. It's not going to happen unless all of his demands are met. But let's say they do sign this peace deal and Ukraine is forced to recognize the occupied territories as part of Russia. What this is going to do is free up probably at least 50% of Russia's forces that are now along the massive front line in Ukraine. And rather than being deployed there, they can redeploy them in other areas. Okay, they can move them to the border of the Baltics. They can move them into Belarus. They can use them to invade other countries now. Okay, so this is a very, very serious situation. And we're hearing that Egypt is calling up military reserves to prepare for a possible escalation with Israel and a deterioration of the situation in Gaza. Okay, and an Egyptian lawmaker, Mustafa Bakri, warned that the Egyptian army could capture Tel Aviv in one day if Israel makes a mistake. Absolutely insane. And I want to update you guys on the situation with the drone, the Russian drone that hit Chernobyl, the containment dome. So the IAEA team on the ground in Chernobyl said that there has been no change in radiation levels at the site since the drone hit the containment dome, and there is significant damage that was caused by the drone. So that containment dome, it's not just like, metal. There's actually like insulation in that dome, and that insulation is what helps keep the radiation from going out of the dome. Okay, that's the shielding. The ongoing efforts to put out and prevent the spread of any remaining fires, apparently fueled by flammable material in the roof cladding, have delayed work to start repairing the damage to the new safe confinement, which was completed in 2019 on top of the sarcophagus that was erected in the immediate aftermath of the accident nearly 4 decades ago. So they have to first finish putting out the fire because they have this radiation shielding. Think of it as like insulation, and that insulation lines the whole dome. And if the fire spreads to other areas through the insulation, the whole containment dome would have to be junked and rebuilt. It costs billions of dollars to build that thing. Okay, it's not the sarcophagus, it's the new safe confinement. The sarcophagus was built in the immediate aftermath by the Russians, and that sarcophagus is no longer viable as a shield against the radiation from the reactor. So they had to build another dome on top of the Russian sarcophagus, okay? And that one cost billions of dollars. So that's very, very serious, guys. And the fact that Putin would send a drone to Chernobyl literally the day before the Munich Security Conference, he was clearly sending a message to the Trump administration and to Western Europe, okay, trying to intimidate them and say, listen, I can really cause chaos if you piss me off. And that was basically a warning shot. That was his warning shot, okay? He was warning them, listen, all it takes for me to cause all kinds of chaos is I just have to send a couple of drones to Chernobyl, or I can launch a missile at Chernobyl and kick up all the radioactive dust into the air. Okay, so this was a warning shot from Putin, and I don't think there's going to be peace, in my opinion. I could be wrong, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens on the 3-year anniversary, which is coming up in just about a week, okay? And I am very concerned that Russia is going to do something crazy on the 3-year anniversary to send a message to the Trump administration that I'm the boss, I'm big bad Putin, I'm not going to give in to any demands. You have to do things my way or the highway. Get used to it, fall in line, I'm the boss, be scared of me. I think that's what Putin is going for, but I could be wrong. And Wyoming has reported its first human case of H5N1 avian influenza. The patient, an older woman from Platte County, is currently hospitalized out of state. Health officials believe she contracted the virus through direct contact with an infected poultry flock at her residence. Wow, so more H5N1 cases popping up in the U.S. And Zelensky told Barack Ravid, he's a famous reporter, that Ukraine hasn't received an invitation for a meeting between the national security advisors from the U.S. and Russia in Saudi Arabia. Okay, so this is going to be a U.S. and Russia only meeting in Saudi Arabia. The national security advisors, the top diplomats of U.S. and Russia, will be in Saudi Arabia. No European presence, no Ukrainian presence, okay? And Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that Europe must be a part of Ukrainian peace talks. And at least 8 people were killed in flooding in Kentucky last night and today. And Israel's defense ministry confirmed it received the delivery of all 1,800 Mk-84 2,000-pound heavy bombs from the U.S. So these were the bombs that the Biden administration refused to release to Israel. Well, now they have them. 1,800 Mark 84 bombs. These are 2,000 pounds each. Guys, you don't need thousands of 2,000-pound bombs to deal with Hamas. Okay, these are bombs for Iran. Okay, and we already have the intelligence that came out from the Biden administration and the Trump administration stating that Israel is planning to strike Iran's nuclear sites this year. Okay, so that's probably why Biden didn't want to release these bombs, because their intelligence showed that Israel would probably use them against Iran, and Biden didn't want that, and now Trump released them. So the Biden administration and the Trump administration both having intelligence that Israel is planning to strike Iran this year. And Lebanon denied permission for Iranian flights to land in Beirut twice this week after the U.S. warned that Israel might shoot the planes down, AFP reported, citing Lebanese security sources. And the IDF confirmed that an Air Force drone struck several armed operatives moving towards Israeli forces in southern Gaza earlier today. Direct hits were identified, so potentially a ceasefire violation. Apparently, these Hamas militants were moving towards Israeli forces, and the Israeli Air Force destroyed them. And Netanyahu praised Trump's leadership in regards to the hostage deal with Hamas, saying the reinforcement of IDF forces combined with Trump's assertive stance led to the release of 3 Israeli hostages despite Hamas refusing to budge earlier. He also thanked Trump for his full support for Israel's decisions regarding the Gaza Strip going forward. And the U.S. has sent a diplomatic questionnaire to European capitals asking questions about how they can contribute to ensuring Ukraine's security, Reuters reported. The document includes questions about the possible future deployment of troops in Ukraine after the end of the conflict. And Zelensky wrote on Twitter yesterday that Ukraine has started working with U.S. President Donald Trump's team and feels that success is attainable. We have begun working with President Trump's team and can already see that success is attainable. Right now, the world is looking up to America as the power that has the ability to not only stop the war, but also ensure the reliability of peace afterwards. Ahead of the Munich Security Conference, I had a good call with the President of the United States, as well as a substantive meeting with Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio. We are also expecting General Kellogg to visit Ukraine soon to further assess the situation and explore pathways to President Trump's strong solutions, which can be truly peacemaking. Our teams are working thoroughly and in detail on a special agreement between our countries, one that will certainly strengthen both America and Ukraine. We are committed to making it a real success, exactly as we agreed. And the Washington Post is reporting that U.S. minerals from Ukraine in exchange for weapons would involve Ukraine's lithium, graphite, and uranium deposits. And the military analysis project Deep State reported that the 15th of February, that's yesterday, was the hardest day on the battlefield in Ukraine in 2025. Today was the hardest day on the battlefield in 2025 with 250 combat clashes since the beginning of the day. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that at least 250 enemy attacks have occurred since the beginning of the day on February 15th. These are not the final figures. The exact ones will be available at 0800, but already this indicates the extremely significant intensity of the enemy's actions. Deep State said the main intensification of the Russians' activity was around Pokrovsk, Kurakove, and Velika Novosilka. Okay, so the Russians are pushing full steam ahead, and this is very, very concerning. And Russia's foreign ministry said that on the 15th of February, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had a telephone conversation with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at the initiative of the U.S. side. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, the conversation outlined the mutual willingness to cooperate on topical international issues, including the settlement around Ukraine, the situation around Palestine, and in general in the Middle East and other regional areas. It is noted that following a telephone conversation between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump on February the 12th, the foreign ministers agreed to maintain a channel of communication to resolve the problems that have accumulated in the Russian-American relations in order to remove the unilateral barriers to mutually beneficial trade, economic, and investment cooperation inherited from the previous administration. The Russian Foreign Ministry also stated that the parties agreed to organize a meeting of experts in the near future to agree on concrete steps to mutually remove obstacles to the work of foreign missions of Russia and the United States. And I want to read to you what the U.S. State Department said. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke today with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as a follow-up to President Trump's conversation with Russian President Putin earlier this week. The secretary reaffirmed President Trump's commitment to finding an end to the conflict in Ukraine. In addition, they discussed the opportunity to potentially work together on a number of other bilateral issues. So this is very, very interesting. We'll see what happens, but if these peace talks fail, I don't think there's ever going to be peace, and I think we're going to see a massive escalation between the U.S. and Russia, because what's going to happen is Trump is basically bending over backwards here to get peace, okay? He's compromising his values. He's putting himself in a bad situation just to try to get peace out of Putin. And if Putin humiliates him, Trump is going to get really mad, and he's going to go full steam ahead with nuclear weapons development, with deployment of forces into Europe and possibly Ukraine, doubling, tripling sanctions, quadrupling sanctions, tariffs on Russia, all kinds of stuff. Okay, so this could go either way. We'll have to wait and see. And the U.S. State Department recently updated its U.S.-Taiwan relations fact sheet, removing language that previously stated that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence. And so basically the U.S. is saying that they support Taiwan's independence versus the Biden administration, which basically sided with China and supported China's one China policy. The U.S. is now behind the Taiwan independence. And a 23-year-old Syrian migrant in Austria killed a 14-year-old boy and injured 4 others in Villach in southern Austria on Saturday afternoon with a knife. So, Europe's got to get that migration under control. This is unacceptable. And the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels are in the center of eastern Congo's second largest city, Bukavu, and they're currently rapidly advancing, and today marks the 1-year anniversary of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's death. And what you're looking at here is a U.S. VIP plane that went from D.C. to Ramstein late last night. This was right around the time when that 268-character EAM was transmitted. And then here we have an Estonian Air Force recon plane patrolling the Gulf of Finland. This is the area where multiple telecommunications and electric cables were cut by Russia. Okay, so Estonia basically only, and not just Estonia, the Baltics only have one connection for their electricity coming from Finland, and then they have one connection coming from Poland. So all Russia would have to do when they invade the Baltics is cut the connection in the Gulf of Finland and then launch a missile at the transmission line going through the Suwalki Gap, and then the Baltics would be completely in the dark. Absolutely insane. And here we have the Chinese recon plane that was in the Taiwan Strait, and then multiple U.S. aerial refuelers in the South China Sea. We also had another P-8 Poseidon sub-hunter patrolling the Mexican border last night. So the U.S. is now using sub-hunters from Jacksonville Naval Air Station to gather intelligence on the Mexican border. And there will be a Minuteman III ICBM test on February 18th. So that's Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Okay, an operational test launch of an Air Force Global Strike Command unarmed Minuteman III ICBM is scheduled between 11 p.m. Pacific time on February the 18th to 5 a.m. Pacific time, February 19th from North Vandenberg. The purpose of the ICBM test launch program is to demonstrate the readiness of U.S. nuclear forces and provide confidence in the lethality and effectiveness of the nation's nuclear deterrent. Okay, so clearly this is Trump showing Putin that they're ready. Okay, they have missiles too. We have missiles. We have accurate missiles, just as accurate as yours, if not more accurate and larger and better. Okay, so this is Trump flexing the nuclear muscle. And it's going to be interesting to see if this test ICBM is going to have just one dummy warhead or three dummy warheads, because last year, after Russia pulled out of the START treaty, the U.S. under the Biden administration tested a Minuteman with three dummy warheads, which indicates that the Biden administration was considering rearming the Minutemans after Russia pulled out of the START treaty. Okay, because under the START treaty, which was signed by Obama and Putin, we removed 2 out of the 3 warheads on each one of our 400 Minuteman III ICBMs. So we went down to just 400 warheads on the Minutemans from 1,200. Okay, but now that there's no arms control treaties, Trump could rearm all of these Minutemans and put the warheads back on them, which would increase our deployed warhead inventory by 800 warheads easily and quickly. And this would be a big message to Putin. Okay, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But that's the latest breaking news that I have. I might be back later on tonight with more breaking news. If not, I'll see you in the live stream. And until the next time, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.